Hi, everybody. I'm Robin Young from NPR and WBUR. Hello. Welcome to what I promise you is going to be a fabulous evening. I am so thrown back, and even thinking about Title IX, I am just awash in memories of starting to run in 1965 when I was 15. Don't do the math. I'm 66. 15 years old, 1965. I don't know where this harebrained notion came from. There were not even any girls' running shoes. I had to wear boys' Tigers. And you had to run at night because people would think what were you running from? That you were crazy. This was not that long after people thought that women's lady parts would fall out, if we got too active. So that's in the 60s. You fast forward 10 years, and I live right around the corner, and I get up and go running every day, and there's my new friend, Susan Ware, who's running on the same street that I'm running. We're going out to the river in the 70s. And Susan, of course, is the Radcliffe scholar who wrote the definitive book on Title IX and also curated the exhibit at the Schlesinger. And Susan, how many Bonnie Bells in a row did you run? You have a record. 25 Bonnie Bells in a row did she run. So I encourage you, there's so much here for you, including the Schlesinger Library, just 2 buildings down, which is the leading library on, the history of women in America. And please visit Susan's exhibit on Title IX that's over there. It's titled Playing Fair, Title IX at 45. It's open from now until September 15th. It's completely open to the public and free. And know that when you are looking at that, it's the work of a 25-year-old who was running up and down the Charles so many years ago. And then 2 years ago, Susan came, always steeping herself, trying to get as close as possible to these women in history that she writes about. She came over here on a summer day and ran around that track up there. There is a track, a women's running track up there. This building that we are in now is the former Radcliffe College gym. It was built in 1898. And Susan, you were saying that being up there, you had this spiritual feeling of being connected to women that were running up there, 100 years ago. I was thinking, when I come in here, I always think of my dear friends, Alice Furlow, who was an NPR commentator who passed away this year, and her roommate, Linda Cabot Black. You may have seen Linda around Cambridge. She's a Cabot. And every morning, she gets up, puts on her sensible shoes, takes her very sensible stray dog, and walks 5 miles up and down the Charles River picking up garbage. But Linda and Alice were roommates here in 1948. And I love to think of these incredible women climbing ropes here in what was then the gym, or playing basketball. We understand it must have been half court. But we're just sitting in this place that has such a history for us to take on the topic of the night. This, of course, is now the Knopfel Center. It's the main meeting place at what's now the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. For those of you unfamiliar, it's the successor to Radcliffe College. It's Harvard's Institute for Advanced Study. Notice I said advanced study, not just study, advanced study. Here. They share transformative ideas from across all disciplines. They have leading experts from all fields who share their knowledge, invite the public in to participate. And by the way, WBUR, we pride ourselves on having sort of the same mission, sharing thoughts, transformative thoughts across all disciplines, and inviting you, the public, in. So we are thrilled to be a partner of this evening. And tonight's experts, we were taking I said, this is a tweet waiting to happen. We were back there. I said, let's take a picture. And the thing almost exploded. There's so much power. They are all beneficiaries of Title IX, which, of course, was the landmark legislation enacted in 1972. Too late for me as a teenager, but it mandated gender equality for all institutions receiving federal aid. And that, of course, changed opportunities for all young women. You didn't have to just go stand on the balance beam, for hours at a time. You could possibly be on teams. And our panelists have played basketball in college and in professional leagues. They've won national championships and Olympic medals. From there, one has gone on to a career in politics, another into medicine, another into business, and I should, of course, note another into journalism. And the legacy of Title IX is in the lives that they are living today. So before we even start, can we have a round of applause, please, for the women we're about to meet? Tonight, we're going to celebrate the upcoming 45th anniversary of Title IX. We're going to explore its legacy from all different viewpoints, hear from our outstanding panelists and moderator, and then you, the audience. Now, to the moderator. My dear friend Rick Carlisle, and as often as I can, I put that sentence together. He's, of course, the former Celtic and now the coach of the Dallas Mavericks. So, my dear friend Rick Carlisle once said to me, you know, there's this Shira Springer girl. You ought to keep an eye on her because she is the real deal. I did. She is. Rick is known for being a quiet mentor to many young women. Shira blew him away. She covered stories at the intersection of sports and society for 20 years at the Boston Globe, reporting on all four major Boston professional teams, plus the NBA Finals, the World Series, the Olympics, the Boston Marathon. She served as the Globe's Celtics beat writer for 7 years, then worked as an investigative enterprise reporter, Olympic columnist, women's sports columnist. Her coverage of the Celtics and the NBA, as well as the larger sports world, earned her awards from the Associated Press and from the Women's Sports Foundation for feature writing. We are so lucky to have her now at WBUR. She grew up in Connecticut, competing in sports, cheering on the New York Mets, Hartford Whalers, graduated from Hartford with honors in social studies, ran cross-country track in college, a little bit of overachievement going on here. Now she runs marathons. Can't wait to hear what race might be next for her. Rick Carlisle knew from what he was talking about when he spotted Shira Springer. Please welcome Shira, and as she brings up her panel for tonight.
Thank you, Robin. That was really too kind. And I want to thank Radcliffe and WBUR for co-hosting this event. Before I turn to tonight's conversation and our panelists, I want to go back to 1999. It's 2 years after the WNBA played its first game. It's 1 year after women's hockey made its Winter Olympic debut and the U.S. won gold. And I want to take you back specifically to July 10th, 1999. You may remember that was the day of the Women's World Cup final in the Rose Bowl. I was there. I was lucky enough to have that be one of my first assignments. And what I remember is a packed stadium. 90,000 people showed up to see women's soccer. You also may remember the game ended in a penalty shootout, 5-4 U.S. victory. Brandi Chastain celebrates by removing her shirt, and that you have that iconic image. And I also remember what happened afterwards when I got to talk to the players and the coaches and some of the administrators from U.S. soccer. And what I remember is that they all saw this as a turning point in women's sports, that the game was an affirmation of the gender equity gains made since Title IX's passage in 1972. And there was a lot of talk not only about the legislative part of Title IX, but about the symbolic force of Title IX as something that made women think about equality of opportunity in sports and outside of sports, and to think about new possibilities. And I think, as we all know here, there's still plenty to talk about because the turning point in women's sports never quite arrived the way many envisioned it would after July 1999. Women's pro soccer leagues have been established and folded multiple times. Women still lag behind men in scholarship dollars and participation. Girls drop out of high school level sports at an alarming rate. It's astonishing. By age 14, they're dropping out 2 times as much as boys. And there's still inequality when it comes to women in the coaching ranks, in the executive ranks, in the general manager ranks, in senior management in various pro sports leagues. So a lot of work to be done. So tonight, with our panelists, I want to talk about Title IX, not just as the legislative part of it, but as the symbolic force, and to use that as a jumping off point for a conversation about sports and gender that will involve all of you. And it's about more than equality of participation. To me, it's about funding and marketing. It's about opportunities at the youth level, getting better facilities. It's interesting, I was talking to Gevvie about this panel, and she was telling me the story of how the U.S. women's soccer team in 1999 fought to compete in large venues. The men on U.S. soccer said, oh, you'll never fill them, you'll never fill them. And the women said, no, we will. give us those 90,000 seat stadiums. We'll put people in the seats, and they did. And then outside of sports, in a larger context, the symbolic force of Title IX, it made women, and I don't think just athletes, but women more aware of inequalities and the fact that they deserved bigger roles and better treatment. And we know that statistics show that sports plays an important role in developing female leaders. It's no surprise to me, actually, that when there was that whole conversation, well, when the women's hockey team and the women's soccer team fought for pay equality this past year, that it mirrored what was happening with discussions across the nation about the gender pay gap. So anyways, that's the way I see Title IX. I'm excited to dive into it with our panelists. You may notice that Angela Ruggiero is not here. Sad to say there was a death in her family and she couldn't make it. But, as I said, excited for the three women who are sitting beside me. We have Maura Healey to my left. You all know Maura Healey as Massachusetts Attorney General, but before she became... Yes, a round of applause for that. But before she became Attorney General, did you know that she was a 16-year-old trying out for the women's national basketball team? I guess there was some ooze there, so maybe not. She went on to captain the Harvard women's basketball team, co-captain, and then play professionally in Salzburg, Austria. And now, instead of dribbling away from pressure, she's taking on pressure at the highest levels of the political arena. Now, Swin Cash, in her storied basketball career, I just don't think storied even describes it. At the college and the pro level, she won 7 championships, 2 NCAA titles with UConn, 2 Olympic gold medals, and 3 WNBA championships. But I have a feeling now she may face her toughest challenge. She's entering the ranks of, or she's in the ranks of basketball executives. She is now the Director of Player Development for the WNBA's New York Liberty. I know it's a tough job you've got ahead of you. And now Gevvie Stone. I have to admit, one of my favorite moments covering the Rio Olympics last summer was getting to watch Gevvie Stone win silver in the singles. It was an amazing race, and I didn't expect it. I don't know if you expected it, but it was just one of those thrilling moments where I got to talk with her beforehand, and I knew all the hard work that had gone into it, and just incredibly impressed. She's a 2-time Olympian. She's also assistant coach of the Radcliffe crew, and in 1 month, Dr. Stone will be starting her residency in emergency medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess. And I'm going to guess you'll probably still find time to roll on the Charles. Absolutely. Perfect. So let's start with this. I'll start a bit broadly, and I'm going to go to you, Maura. Where would you be without Title IX?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be Attorney General. And I say that not just because I made that one commercial where I spun a basketball, although that helped. But I think that sports really gave me esteem and self-confidence. I started playing sports in the late 70s through the 80s and early 90s and was a beneficiary of Title IX. And a lot of ground had already been broken in terms of the formation of youth sports teams for girls. And so I just think that as I look back, sports and really what was created through Title IX, for me, it was about instilling discipline, learning how to compete as a girl. I think that that's important that we not be afraid to compete. And I think of so many lessons along the way that I learned from sports. And it's clear to me that I wouldn't have had the experience of coming to college here and playing for Kathy Delaney Smith were it not for what sports gave me and continued to give me, and even going to try out as a, I guess I was 5'4". I've never really grown. I think that's as far as I got. I've been 5'4" since I think I was in 8th grade. So at 16, at 16, I thought I was all that. Went off to try out for the national team, and I've got a rude awakening. But what was really cool about that experience was meeting women who had who I had idolized, and to see women like that, to be inspired by women like that, definitely motivated me. I remember thinking, boy, if Nancy Lieberman can win 4 Olympic medals, what can I do? And so I just am forever grateful to sports because of what it has given me and the experiences that it's given me.
I'll go down the line with Swin, if not for Title IX.
I would echo that. I think if it wasn't for Title IX, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I think Title IX, for me, was a sign of opportunity. And I think it led to having got this God-given ability to play sports and compete. But you can play sports and compete when you come from humble beginnings, but if there's no opportunity to take that to the next level, then you're just competing in your neighborhood. And so when my mom told me at a young age that, hey, I can't pay for you to go to college, but these people are writing letters and they see you playing basketball, they see you doing track and all these different things, you have real opportunity. It's hard to understand that message internally as a young kid, but my mother and I had those conversations. And so I tell kids all the time now is that I use basketball. Basketball never used me, because the end game for me was always to use my sport to get my education and then to be able to go out there in the world and make a change. And because of basketball, I've been able to do that all over the world. And that is, to me, pretty remarkable, thinking where I came from to where I am today.
Gevvie.
I also echo what Swin and Maura said. I think as a rower, you grow up with a very close relationship with Title IX. My mom rowed in the 70s with and knew the Yale women who walked into the athletic director's office protesting, and she raced the 1976 Olympics, where they got garters as part of their Olympic kit. Needless to say that 40 years later, we were not getting garters in our Olympic kit. And I think the change generationally, growing up with a mother who raced at the elite level, was very visible to me, how many opportunities I got compared to the ones she got. She went to Cal Berkeley, which didn't have a women's rowing program at the time, so she transferred to Cal State Long Beach, where she could row at a local club. So, and I just kind of took it for granted that I could apply to colleges where I could row. Not that I took it for granted, I did appreciate it, but it just, the number of opportunities was so much greater by the time that I got into the field, and it enabled me to receive an education at the same time, and I got to grow as an athlete, and that's why I am who I am today, is really that chasing that student athlete dream.
Mm-hmm. Curious if, you mentioned you had the benefit, your mother experienced things that, you fortunately did not have to experience, and I'm wondering if any of you personally have experienced differences in treatment, that have kind of struck you. I know, actually, Swin, it wasn't during your athletic career, but broadcasting, right? Where the real gender difference came out. Why don't you tell us about your time at ESPN?
Early on in my career, I was given the opportunity to cover the NBA. And at a time, you're 24, 25-year-old coming in talking about, well, Kobe Bryant needs to do this, or LeBron James needs to do this, and this person needs to do this, and this is what I see. And I remember a producer kind of pulling me aside and being like, well, I think you want to kind of say it like this, and this is the direction I think you probably should go in. And I kind of took a step back, because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, not only have I played the game at a high level, I actually have had conversations with these guys, and I'm pretty sure this is what Kobe would do in this situation. Or I'm pretty sure if I went and talked to Carmelo, he was saying this. But it was like being a woman, in my opinion, because I didn't play in the NBA, and it was only the WNBA, and didn't matter if I had an Olympic gold medal, it still wasn't equivalent to actually talk about men's sport over here. And as a young person coming in, as you know, whether it's on air or in journalism, you always want to kind of take the information in, but at the same time, you have to have the ability to have integrity and know your craft and what you're talking about, and be able to stand your ground on what your opinions are. And I had to learn that early on in my career, but that the flip side of that is when we look at how women's sports is covered, it's not covered the same. And that's always my issue, is that a lot of times on the entertainment side of sports, they tell you the stories. You fall in love with athletes because you kind of know their stories, or you have a certain team. And I know I'm in Boston, but I grew up outside of Pittsburgh. So you talk about football, I'm talking about the Steelers. That's just who it is. Hey. But I say that to say is that I grew up loving that team. But if I didn't know anything about the Pittsburgh Steelers and I just moved to Pittsburgh and they're talking about some of the players, I'm probably going to have a connection. Whereas if you watch women's sports some of the time, they're coming, if the tip is at 7 p.m., they're coming on at 6:59, going right into the game. They're not telling you the stories. They're not really kind of packaging it like they package the NBA Eastern Conference Finals. You're gonna know when Isaiah Thomas went to the bathroom and what new outfit he had. You know, and you fall in love with it. And that's why when I went into broadcasting, I really wanted to continue to make sure that I was pushing hard for us to tell our stories, because it's just as important for people to not only love our sports, but to fall in love with the individuals. So.
But speaking of knowing the individuals, I think you had Gevvie had an interesting experience at a World Cup event that just showed the disparity in the attention that people pay to men's rowing versus women's rowing.
And men's issues versus
men's
women's
issues,
issues.
yes.
At the World Cup last year in 2016, the reigning world champion Kim Crow from 2015 had gotten married over the winter, and her name was now Kim Brennan. And the Australian team, as is appropriate, entered her as Kim Brennan. And when the referees, the head referees and head committee was seeding the regatta, so they ranked the top 6 athletes, they hadn't seeded her. And so we looked at the heat sheet, and there were 3 of the top rowers in one group of 6, and where there should only be 2. And I looked at this and go, oh my gosh, I'm racing the Olympic champion and the world champion and me, and I'd been 4th world championships in one heat. Like, what is going on? Freaking out. I'm texting Kim, and we're texting Mirka going, how did this happen? And one person raised their hand at the coaches meeting who also noticed, like, why isn't Kim Brennan seated? And the head of the seating committee said, who is Kim Brennan? We don't have any records for her, in all seriousness. And the head coach said, that's Kim Crow, she got married. And just the thought process that it wouldn't occur to them that Australia had gotten a new single sculler in 1 year whose first name was also Kim. And they just couldn't connect the dots. And the head of the US team, who I think fortunately in the US, we do have a head coach who is aware of Title IX and women's issues, and he rolled his eyes. He was just, I mean, mostly it's European men on the committee, and the fact that they had this lack of awareness of things that women go through, and lack of awareness of the women's sport, that they wouldn't have paid attention to the reigning world champion and future Olympic champion, that she had gotten married. So it was definitely, we rolled our eyes and laughed, and now it's a great story.
Or I'm sure you walk into a lot of rooms where you might be the only woman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, boy, I see it every day. There's a tremendous amount of unconscious bias in our world for all the gains that we've made. And there is sexism out there. And, you know, I'll tell you, it's really interesting. I see it so pervasively in my job when I host meetings, and inevitably, vast majority, if not all men, coming in to meet with me, or when I go somewhere. But look at the numbers, you know, in C-suites, among CEOs, boards, and in elective office at all levels. You just see the dearth of women. And that matters, because that translates to policy and furthers disparities and inequalities. And, you know, it comes up in different ways. I've got a program in schools here in Massachusetts where we're teaching young people in high school, empowering them with the competencies to take on things like relationship violence and dating violence. And a couple months ago, I was in a school, and I was listening to a girl tell the story about how her boyfriend was trying to get her to stop playing sports and just watch his sporting games. And, you know, that's happening today. You see a lot of a lot of girls out there playing. It's so inspiring and wonderful. But there are problems that remain. On the more sort of light, I remember March Madness a couple months ago, and one of the political news outlets tried this game among elected officials around the country. Send us your brackets, right? Now, they only wanted the men's bracket. So I sent a men's and a women's. They didn't print it, but, it's just not acceptable. But it goes to what both Swin and Gevvie have been speaking about, the inequities that exist in sports for women right now. When you look at media and you look at media time, when you look at advertising and marketing dollars, when you look at the collegiate level and the pro level, what's happening, pay disparities. We saw it recently with the women's hockey team. We've seen it with the soccer team. And if you looked at coaches across this country, you'd see real disparities in the collegiate ranks, I'm sure. So we've got our work to do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned executives. One thing that came up in researching for this panel is there was a survey of 400 female executives and it found that 94% of them played sports. And out of that number, 52% of them at the university level. And I think, I know, Swin, you work a lot with young girls. I mean, does that just underscore how important it is to keep these girls playing and to give them opportunities? Because I think Title IX sort of takes care of the college level, but there's a whole group of youth athletes, and as I mentioned, girls drop out 2 times as much as boys do.
I think it's vitally important to get young girls involved in sports because a lot of times, and I know we have some stage parents where everybody thinks that their kid's gonna go pro, which is okay. It could be your dream, doesn't mean it's your kid's dream. But the kids, what you get out of sports, it builds character. Bottom line, you have to learn so many different disciplines, whether you're on a team sport, an individual sport. There's something you're gonna get that you're gonna have to take that into the real world, into the business world. Now being in the front office with the New York Liberty, the one thing that we look at immediately, they wanna know, look at your resume. If you had encountered sports or played sports at some type of level, we're looking at that because that lets us know that you've had to go through some things, you understand teamwork. I mean, there's a lot of different things that I learned just being in sports, and I'll give a quick example. When I went to the University of Connecticut and got on campus, I came there with 4 other girls. There was 5 of us that were in the freshman class, and we all had different backgrounds. One was from the suburbs in Dayton, Ohio. I was from Pittsburgh area. We had somebody from New Jersey, and then Sue, who was my college roommate, was from Syosset, New York. And I'll never forget, Sue and I were just like hot and cold, everything's completely opposite. But we had to learn how to work together. And the best thing for us was that culturally, we came from 2 different backgrounds, family, upbringing, economics, everything. But I learned probably more from her in 4 years, and I think she probably would say the same, than anything that I learned on the basketball court, because we had to learn how to deal with each other, how to interact, how to work as a team. And that for me was like the greatest feeling, is because I say this all the time, diversity, inclusion, having women on your staff, having minorities being part of the conversation. It gives you more of a worldview in sports that you then can use in the corporate world.
You seem like you're nodding, Maura. Do you have something you want to add in terms of what you see and the lessons you took from basketball into the political arena?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm new in the political arena, but
You sure you weren't boxing? You sure you didn't take up boxing before you went to the political realm?
No, the good thing, us little people, we know how to box out low and throw elbows. And you big people don't get the ball unless we give it to you.
Right.
So, I think that, the idea about the lessons is really true, and I know that just running for office, there were ups and downs, there were good polls, there were devastating polls, there were a lot of people who counted me out, and I think that what I learned through playing the the pundits didn't know that, but that's how I approached it. And every day was like practice, get out, get after it. You're gonna have good days, bad days, and see how it goes, and always believe in yourself and always believe that you can win. And so that was really incredibly empowering to me, that I didn't even appreciate it at the time. It was just sort of happening. And I think, the reason, in addition to having a lot of good help from a lot of great people out across the state, the reason that I was successful in running. But I think that statistic is interesting, and I think there's a lot in that statistic, because I think that you do, through sports, learn drive and discipline and goal setting and teamwork, all of these things that can make you successful in any number of environments. I also sometimes wonder about a different side of that, though, and that is the presence of sports in our culture. On some level, I wonder how many male CEOs also played sports, and I wonder if women coming into the workplace with a commonality with male counterparts helps them advance at a different pace or in different ways. I'm just putting that out there as a thought. I don't know if there's any validity to it whatsoever, but
Makes sense.
it's just something to think about.
Gevvie, you are. Well, actually, I want to talk a little bit about women, and we sort of touched upon this earlier, perception, marketing. When I'm looking at Swin, I know Swin was behind a campaign for the New York Liberty, and I guess, Gevvie, too, just in your experience, I mean, have you felt any pressure to be a certain way, to market yourself a certain way? You're you are in rowing, but you are in an individual sport, and when the lights are on, when the race is on, it's just you out there, and there is pressure to get, I would assume, sponsors and people, paying attention to you.
Yeah, I think rowing is such a small sport that in a way you're lucky you get away from a lot of the pressure, because no one's getting a sponsorship any way, shape, or know how. It's rowing.
You can hope.
You can hope. But I think I definitely see it in other sports. And I think across the board at the Olympics, you notice that female athletes are more likely to have their hair done and their nails done and their makeup on. And it's almost as if their presence on the playing field and their performance isn't enough of a show. And it's not enough to look at how fast they run or how well they dribble. They also have to look good while doing it. And I think how they play is the most beautiful thing about them. And if they want to get their nails done and they put their makeup on, that's great. But it should be, I hope that through sports, women feel empowered just by the movement and the performance, and don't feel pressured to cloud that in any way, shape, or form with a ribbon in their hair or the color of their lipstick. And I do think, you don't see it the same extent in male athletes.
Any idea how we change that? Any suggestions? I mean, how do we change the fact, get people to value the performance more than sort of the exterior, so to speak? Any?
Well, the thing that comes to mind was there was a campaign for Ask the Athlete, I think is the name of it, and they did a little clip and they asked male athletes questions that they had asked female athletes. I don't know, did you guys see this? It was a little snippet that was done, and they were asking pro football players, pro tennis players, all these things like, oh, can you tell us about your outfit today? And we heard you broke up with your girlfriend. Can you tell us the details? And all these questions, and the men's faces just showed disdain or surprise, and in some cases just reacted with like, are you kidding? And then they revealed that all these questions that they were asking were questions that had been asked to female athletes. And a lot of it comes from how the media portrays these athletes, as Swin was talking about earlier. Creating a story that represents the athlete, not the player, who they are as a player, not who they are as a drama, as a rom-com or anything like that. And I think what people ask to hear. So it goes back to both the media and how they portray it, but also what people are reading and what the fans are asking to hear. So hopefully little girls are asking not who made that outfit, I want to go buy it, but how many hours do you spend in the pool? And questions that reflect performance instead of physical appearance or love life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's two things in that. I think the people that are asking the questions, the journalists that are trying to get the stories are vitally important. There's a responsibility that's there. I also think there's a responsibility on the leagues and the individuals. I know for the WNBA, I played 15 years in the WNBA, and there was a point just coming in early on in my career where it seemed like our whole marketing campaign was based around, how we looked. And the uniforms changed. It got a little shorter, and next thing I know, I wasn't tucking in my jersey. I'm like, I tucked in my jersey my whole life. Who doesn't tuck in a basketball jersey? Like, I just never understood it. But then you look at the fact that they were trying to sell us as, we were feminine, but we still play basketball. Now, granted, I like to dress up. I like to take pictures. That may work for me, but it doesn't mean it works for all the 144 women that are in the WNBA. And so I started seeing like our marketing, our branding was putting everybody into this one box, which is not fair. I think we've gotten to a point now where it's about the game and how you play the game. And now you look at the campaign of Watch Me Work, and it's really about watching how they play basketball. Whether you like how they dress up, whether you like how they have their hair, come and watch the authentic part of the game. And it took us a while to get to this place. But I know for me, working with the New York Liberty, it's important that we have our overarching brand of what we want our team to be, but we also have to stay connected to individually, do the players fit in that? And making sure we're staying true to who they are as individuals. And that's one of the first things when I came into the front office, I wanted to make sure that I made that very clear, is that I want to make sure our brand represents everyone and it's just not a few. And I think if every kind of organization and league take that responsibility on, I think we'll be in a better place and hit it in the right direction. But you have to think about it, people are consumers. And so there's a lot of different studies they do nowadays, and they figure out how many clicks it's gonna get. They figure out how many people are watching, who's gonna go purchase something. And a lot of times advertisers are gonna go in that direction because it comes back to, as you know, the bottom line.
Because I think the important phrase that you said was, when I got into the front office, I did this. And to me, so much about what happens in sports is about women having a voice. And elsewhere, I think women having a voice either in the front office or in the Attorney General's office, and being almost a final decision maker. And it made me think of your program with Game Changers, and I'm wondering if you feel the same way, in the sense that having somebody who's attuned to the issues a young girl might face when her boyfriend tells her not to play sports, or just attuned to different issues that women, if that makes a difference, and it's part of what Title IX's legacy should be, which is getting more women in the front office, in political office, and if that needs to be more of a priority in some ways.
Well, it does, because just having a law on the books doesn't do anything by itself. And we've had Title IX for a good number of years, but let's face it, we still see a lack of female representation in legislatures and Congress, in elective office, in boardrooms, and running corporations. I mean, so we have work to do. There's something still really pernicious and real inequity out there. And so I'm a big believer in women running for office at all levels, because I think that if you look at policies, look at the decision makers. I find that picture staggering of a few weeks ago with all those men standing around deciding what was going to happen with women's health care. But as a woman attorney general, sure, I've had a particular focus on issues that have a certain resonance with me: human trafficking and what's happening to the sexual exploitation of girls and women. Certainly what's happening with relationship violence and teen dating violence and domestic violence. Pay equity, we worked hard this year to get a bill through that's the first of its kind in the country. and certainly issues around healthcare and consumer issues, where disproportionately women are the ones who not only are making the decisions around households, but are the ones disproportionately adversely affected by policy. So I'm a big one to say, get out there, run, let's get represented. People need to hire people. Take a chance and hire women, promote women, whatever organization you're in. I mean, how ridiculous that you're going to get somebody, not Swin, to do the play-by-play or cover those games, right? Is there anybody who has more capacity or competence? No. But you see this all the time where, fabulous, talented women with so much, bringing so much to the table are routinely passed over for mediocre or less than mediocre males. And, so wherever you have power or opportunity to hire and promote women, do that and stick by them and stick with them.
This is Swin, what are you doing in the Liberty's front office? Because I looked at your staff, and I think you're one of two women in the front office.
Our staff, I feel, is very diverse. Like, I feel good going into our offices because I look at some of the other teams and their staff, and it kind of makes me laugh a little bit. But for me, I love the fact that I can come in as now a rookie in the front office, have these fresh ideas, this progressive mindset of where I want to see women's sports go, and everyone's open to listen. And yes, I played the game for 15 years, but I'll never forget one of the first meetings I had, and the young lady who just got hired, she had asked, well, what is it exactly that you do? And, what did you study in school to help you get here? And I said, well, in school I studied communications, but for the last 15 years, I've not only played basketball here, I've also played in Russia, I played in the Czech Republic, in China. 15 years, I was on the executive board for our committee. I went through two CBA negotiations. I made hires at the union. I had fires at the union. I think I got some background and qualification to be able to be here and do this, but as athletes, sometimes they think because you play a sport that there's nothing else you can do. They put us all into this box that you're just a jock. And if you know anything about female athletes, it doesn't matter what level that you're on, we're always trying to achieve in the classroom, in our job. Like, we love the sport, we play the sport, but realistically, we know it's not gonna set us up for life. Like, we're doing other things. If you go across the WNBA, you go across our team in general, there are women that own businesses. There are women that are in construction right now. There are women that are taking their investments and they're looking at the markets. And if people don't open those doors to give them an opportunity or a chance, how can they advance and how can they bring the women behind them?
You've talked to me about some interesting solutions that there was the Instagram.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, this is interesting too, because, so there are big solutions, and then there are little small ways in which, the bias comes out against women's athletics, and sometimes just the smallest little change can sometimes have large ramifications. And I think that was what you were thinking about when you thought about the Instagram.
Yeah, we're talking at the university level, even at an institution like Harvard, which definitely values women as a whole and thinks about it. Obviously, we're here. One of our former captains last year, who's actually here tonight, counted up the pictures in the Harvard Athletics Instagram account, and it's about 2/3 male, 1/3 female. And why? The Harvard has an equal balance in terms of the number of sports played by women and men. So shouldn't they represent those sports equally and try to increase awareness of every sport equally? I mean, that's the job of the athletic department. And I think as a whole, social media has such an influence in our world today, and it is such an easy thing to tweak in terms of increasing awareness. So many people, you're talking about clicks, like so many people check Facebook, check Instagram, check Twitter. And so when you have accessibility and something like that, just making sure that on all levels you're increasing awareness of women and men, and also creating I think we're talking about also creating a demand and placing a value on women's sports that's equal to men's sports. So at Harvard, you have to pay to attend games for more men's sports than women's sports. And obviously football throws it off because there's no women's football team. But even if you eliminate football, you have to pay to attend more men's sports than women's sports. You pay to attend men's lacrosse. You do not pay to attend a women's lacrosse game. Why? Why should that be disparity? If it's a money thing, then decrease the cost of a men's ticket and increase the cost of a women's ticket so that they're even. They should create a demand and place a value on women's sports that represents that they hold the sport in high esteem. Everyone is a student athlete. They're all playing at the same level, and I think in order for outsiders to see that, it can begin with an institution saying we value these sports equally, so we are going to treat them equally.
One other thing I'd add is that I think that we need to find ways to support women. Buy season tickets, buy the package, buy the jerseys. Have your little, sons wearing jerseys of Liberty players, right? Like that'll be the day. That's what we want to see. So, where we care about these issues, let's put our money and our wallets and our energy and our time investing in and supporting women's athletics. Take them to girls' high school soccer games. Take your kids to college games. Really support the programs and grow and create that demand and that consumer side of things. I think that's really important. I think that we don't do as much as we could.
Yeah. I think that we are heading in a step in the direction. I remember the Women's World Cup, the most recent one, they didn't make a lot of the jerseys in men's sizes. And the men's sizes sold out instantaneously. I mean, that's a great step. The company's going, oh shoot, we made a mistake. We didn't, and I think there was a public announcement about it because these jerseys were flying off the shelves, and it just didn't occur to whatever Nike executive to make as many men's sizes of female jerseys. I mean, plenty of female wear Brady jerseys. Why shouldn't it go the other way around? But I think that was definitely a step in the right direction. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of give you this kind of brief analogy just to think about, and not even really answer today, but just go home and sleep on this, because I had a conversation during our television show with our staff, and we were in the production room and we were talking about how women support the NFL, which I said earlier about I love my football team, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you in here have a football team you love too. But the thing is that we were talking because all of domestic violence, a lot of different things were happening in the NFL. But if you looked at their merchandise and things that were being purchased and season tickets, none of that stuff was really being affected. And it made me start thinking about women's sports and how hard it is for us, for the New York Liberty, to get women to come out and support women at our game, to buy the jerseys or buy the tickets. And there's always a complaint about, well, this costs this amount or that amount. But I looked over here at this men's league that, yes, it's a powerhouse and it's been there for a number of years, but nothing was affecting. I mean, bad news after bad news, it wasn't affecting their numbers. And I think about, why is that? And you think about it because there's a loyalty to your team. You love your team. You may not care what the rest of the league is doing, but you feel like this is my team, I'm connected to it. So for me, whenever we get to the point where all of New York and the surrounding areas love the Liberty and they're gonna support the Liberty, that's when I'm like, all right, we're moving in the right direction. And I just don't see that yet of women coming out and supporting women. The WNBA is the longest professional women's league in the world. Their union is the longest running union in the world that's ever been. And in order for us to keep it going, for my 13-year-old niece who's out there with a WNBA basketball in a gym by herself, we have to make sure that we support it, because what's going to happen is if it goes away, we're going to be marching up and down the streets and complaining about why it didn't last. But the reality is not enough of us are supporting it. So,
Me nicely to sort of what does the future look like? And after that, we've reached the point in the program where it's open to audience questions. But I want to know, what does the future, I mean, Swin, you gave us one potential scary scenario of the future, which is people marching up and down the street without teams. But, what does women's sports, what does college sports look like? What do professional sports look like? Are we ever going to have sort of that big moment where the pro sports and the college sports get the kind of support that we thought they would get coming out of the Women's World Cup in 1999? And I open it to all of you to kind of look in your crystal ball.
I'm just a firm believer in the fire that's in our country right now. And I just believe, and I said this, and no disrespect to the men in here, but this is just the year of the women. And it's time for us to take the torch and move it forward in all aspects of business and sports and everything else, because there just comes a time and a moment, and I think we're in it, where you have to just stand up. And my mom used to always say to me, if you don't stand for something, you're gonna fall for anything. And that's how I kind of live my life, that right now, when I speak out, when I stand up for things that are good or bad, I understand it's not for me, it's for all of the girls that are coming up behind me. And I think if we have that mindset, I'm starting to feel like there's more of a collective with that. There could be teams, there could be the soccer team that's a moment, the USA team that's a moment. I think right now our country is just in that moment. And so for me, I hope this year of the woman is kind of a revigorating thing that we'll all kind of grab a hold with and run with it. The greatest thing for me was I spoke at university with Dante Stallworth, who's a friend of mine, and he actually played here before too. And he said, yeah, I can say it he said to the class, I'm a feminist. And that just really rocked me. I thought that was pretty cool, because I've never heard a guy just come right out and say it. But I'm glad that men are comfortable saying I support women and being okay with that. So I hope that's the direction we're going in.
Thoughts?
I'm optimistic and longer term. I think as we get farther from Title IX and more women participate in sports, it also is more of an opportunity for women to become coaches. I think as a rower, being in rowing now, rowing's been an NCAA sport for about 20 years now, and more women are entering the coaching ranks. And I think I've been very fortunate as an athlete to be coached by two very strong women and coached under a very strong woman. I think the head coaches are still mostly men, and as it is an NCAA sport and as we progress, a lot of the assistant coaches are female. And when you get a female mentor and a female head coach and you see that female in position of power, I think you can connect on a level that you can't. There are a lot of great men's coaches, but you just don't see them as a role model in the way that you can see a strong women's coach. And I think as we get further from Title IX, hopefully we get more and more females in those coaching roles, hopefully coaching not only females, but also males. It can definitely, why not go both ways?
Yeah, because now I think the latest statistic I saw was that more than 60% of college coaches across all divisions are actually men. So, women's coaches. Yeah. What do you see in the future, Maura?
Well, I think there is going to be still a need to ensure accountability and specifically enforce the law. I think we're going to see more lawsuits. I think that, with this energy, with this movement, people are going to realize and look for and appreciate some more of the inequalities that exist even with Title IX. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think about those women at Brown many years ago who brought the fight, and if it wasn't holding organizations, institutions accountable in a very real way, in a way that impacted prestige or bottom line, we would not have seen some of the advances. That's just the way it goes. So I actually think we're probably, in a time where we're going to see some more litigation based on existing disparities. I also think that it is optimistic where we're at. I think that in the sense that more women, I think more women and more girls are playing sports. I think that it's right we have a concern about the lack of women coaching right now, and what we've seen in terms of the trend there. That's an issue. But I think about what Title IX gave women access to in terms of sort of this license, this freedom to not just get out there and compete, but to sweat. You think about us, I think we're a healthier population for it, and much better off. And I'm heartened, when I think about just a couple weeks ago, I was in a classroom down on the South Shore, and I went around the room to a group of third graders, and I'm asking all of them what they wanted to be when they grow up. And of course, any number of the boys were pro baseball player, pro soccer player, I try to encourage them to keep their options open with a backup plan. Especially the boys, they just don't see it. But I got to this little girl, her name was Callie, and she was sitting there, and she said she wanted to go. She's a basketball player. She's going to go to UConn, and then she's going to play pro. So I think about people like Swin blazing the trail for that little third grader today, and that leaves me optimistic about where we're going to go.
And now I guess we'll turn, there are microphones being placed, so anyone who has a question for the panelists, please step up to the microphone and ask away.
My daughter's 29 now, but when she was about, 7, we started watching women's basketball, college basketball. So Gino Auriemma is like the father, right? I mean, I think he's the one exception with the male coaches, I think. But I want to know, there's always been this woman next to him, long blonde hair. And she seems to be a very important person. She's been there for years. So what would you say about her, and what's her name? I want to give her some...
I'm going to have to text her after this. Yeah. Well, since you stayed with him for 30 years, you're just now the little blonde woman back there. Well, we call her CD. Her name is Chris Daly. She actually played basketball at Rutgers. Yes, she's very tall. She played basketball at Rutgers. She actually came in with him, and they together built it from the ground up. She doesn't get enough credit, but I think over the years, anytime players have been interviewed, anytime I've been interviewed, I never just mention him without mentioning her. Because to me, they're a package deal. To me, and I say this to his face, like, he doesn't get to where he's at without her. And a lot of people are like, well, why didn't she go be a head coach? She enjoyed her role and her position there, and I respect her for that. She just never felt, and as she would tell you if she was here, that there was a job that was right for her. And so what I learned from her at UConn was about who I was as a person when we step onto the court, when we travel, how we got dressed, how we went to banquets. She's the one, the mastermind behind when we walk into a building and we have UConn across our chest. She's the one that was molding all of that. So when you talk about that role model, that mother figure, the things that he was never really strong in that area, Chris was there.
You can tell that, because you can tell him always kind of talking to her when I would watch the game.
Well, if you ever notice, if he's about to get a technical and he's about to get to half court, she's the one that's piddly-paddling out there to really get him. They have a great relationship, but yeah, she's like, if there's the godfather, she's like the godmother of UConn, I guess. But yeah, she plays a vital role for that university.
I was thinking about Gevvie's comment about how the women felt they had to dress and look and show themselves in a certain way, even though they're Olympic athletes. And I'm wondering why we haven't commented on the role of homophobia and its effect on women's sport.
Well, that's a great question. I could take that head on because we get it in the WNBA. And I've asked the question. I did a piece with the Players Tribune, Tanisha Wright, Essence Carson, and we asked those questions of why don't we get the same recognition? Why is it so hard for people to have an appetite for the WNBA? And there's two different things. People who have a problem with the LGBTQ community and people who have a problem with majority of the league being minority. And until we have those conversations and be able to talk about those things, it's really hard for you to address them. And it's not taboo, it's what it is. And I love the fact that we're a diverse group of women, but if you just focus on the basketball, that's what it should be on. But people are scared to have those conversations, but our players aren't scared to have it. Our players support across the board, everyone. And I think that's been one of the issues in the WNBA. And I can give you a quick example because I want to let you ask your question, is that the U.S. women's team has won 6 Olympic gold medals in a row, just as dominant as UConn, 6 Olympic gold medals in a row. We are close friends and love this U.S. soccer team. If you watch how our U.S. soccer team, from sponsorship to when it's Olympic time, the packages that are put around and and the women, and it's like that's their time of year, it is not the same with kind of our jewel, I feel, of U.S. basketball. with 6 Olympic gold medals, because that is the goal, correct? If you're an Olympian, you want to try to get to the pinnacle of reaching gold medals. And so we asked the question of, why not us? And this was 2 Olympics ago. Why not us? And if you look at our U.S. women's basketball team for a number of years, it's very diverse. We have women who are not afraid to say, yes, I'm a lesbian, yes, I have a partner, and it's okay. And for some of our friends who are on the soccer team who also may have a partner, they may not feel comfortable being able to say that or do it because they're getting packaged and put in a way that is completely different. So I do think that that is an issue that we have to address and talk about in order for us to kind of push that aside and let the sport just be the sport and not make it about all these different political issues.
And, I think that a couple things on this. Look, I remember in high school and in college, homophobic, comments and characterizations and slights, and it was just part of the scene, I feel like, until there was actual legal action. And there ended up being more legal action in this country establishing greater rights and protections for LGBT people, and I'm a beneficiary of that. But make no mistake about it, the homophobia is still very real, and so it's not just limited to sports. Look at society right now, when we have this misogynist in chief in charge of the White House, when we have an attorney general, United States Attorney General, whose first act was to rescind the guidance for LGBT students' protections in schools. These are not good signals, but make no mistake about it, they reflect a homophobia that is still existent across any number of industries and sectors and spaces. And on the court and in the ball field, it's hard being a woman athlete. It's hard being a gay woman athlete. It's hard being a woman coach. It's hard being a gay woman coach. Harder, I think. So, to me, it just points to the work we've got to do as a society and as a culture, and that starts with repudiating and rejecting racism, sexism, homophobia, you name it, in all forms whenever we see it.
Back to body image for just a moment, but take it in a different direction. I worked at Sports Illustrated as one of their women reporters in the 1970s. And I remembered that it was very rare for women to be on the cover of our magazine then, except in mid-February when we did the bathing suit issue. What I want to swing back around to now is if we look at Sports Illustrated's bathing suit issue this year, we will find that there are less of a bathing suit on all of the models. But surprisingly, we will find that in those pages, there are the 2 top US gymnasts from the Olympics, Simeon and Ali, who are both posed in deliberately, and they speak about this on their Instagrams and the rest, to show the muscularity of their bodies, because they feel as though, particularly in their sport, it's been sort of the pixie girl, who kind of leaps, up, and the muscularity isn't really a part of what they are. So in effect, they're showing off their bodies and displaying them in this traditionally very misogynistic way. But I do want to compare that to the fact that in so many other instances, you do see female athletes very scantily clad and very much posing in ways that are very predictable. They're almost ways that models would have posed in those swimsuit issues years ago. So I think we're seeing this sort of duality of how we think about body image of women athletes, and I'd just like your thoughts on that.
Can I say something first, though, Melissa, before you sit down, just to recognize Melissa?
Yeah.
In case you don't know who Melissa is, it's Melissa Ludke, personal hero. And she is one of the pioneers in women's sports journalism because she sued the Major League Baseball commissioner for locker room access in 1977. And won. So reaction to what Melissa said. or comment on the duality?
Gosh, I mean, I think not just as athletes, but maybe athletes because we are in the position of being in minimal clothing frequently and shown in minimal clothing frequently. I mean, as a rower, we wear unisuits. You can see everything in a unisuit. And it does create a self-consciousness about body image. And Simone and Allie have both been very vocal, not just through that picture, but also through Twitter and Instagram and the like, about the fact that they've received negative fan feedback about their muscles, and also expressing a pride for those muscles. It takes a lot of work to build those muscles. That's purposeful. And I think that they are a little bit a younger generation, and I hope that they're representative of the girls who are coming through. As one of the coaches at Radcliffe this year, I mean, you see it in college athletes still. You see an awareness of what their body type is compared to other students on campus, an awareness of muscles, issues around eating, and I think it is a problem. How to fix it right away, I don't know, but I think Simone and Allie are taking an awesome first step.
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot even with Serena Williams, and she constantly gets talked about her muscles 24/7. But Serena also likes to dress up, and she likes to be in gowns, and there's always something that's said about her body. I'm all for, I don't care what age you are, as a woman, to be empowered by your body. And what I do with my body, my body image is up to me. And I love the fact to see athletes embracing that and showing their strength in it, however they do it. I do think that you can tell when somebody's only doing it because they're collecting a check versus somebody that's doing it because it's empowering to them and they're sending out a certain message. And maybe it's not so clear, but it's pretty clear for me. And as someone that, when I was younger, I used to do runway modeling. And when I went into basketball, I never wanted to touch that. I didn't want to always go to the feminist where I like to wear dresses and do this because I thought that people looked at me as being weak because that was a side of me that they didn't necessarily always see. So I kind of stayed away from that. And then I just started embracing it like, this is who I am. Okay, if I want to, wear these type of clothes and everything, that's who I am. So I thought what they did in regards to the swimsuit was pretty awesome. And I just think we have to take it for what it is because people do it for different reasons.
I respect that. I think, though, that I think the swimsuit edition is ridiculous in the sense that, and I am all for women showing off their muscles and like being proud of their bodies and like just go for it. That's awesome to me. But, sometimes I wonder, like, are we that surprised that people weren't apoplectic over the fact that, the Ray Rice video or, that pervasive domestic violence or sexual assault has been allowed to occur in the NFL over the years without any sort of accountability or retribution? I mean, this just feeds who is actually getting that magazine and exactly what is that reader and what are they taking as a message from that? And I think that this is part of society's ownership. I mean, we can talk a big game about a lot of stuff, but let's face the reality of some of what's right in front of us with some of this.
Thank you for this very good conversation. I wanted to ask a somewhat different question. Understandably, at this 45th anniversary, we are celebrating Title IX, and we are focusing on the ways that women's athletics deserves to get a share of the pie, and we want it to be recognized and in many ways to mimic male sports. But male athletics aren't necessarily the panacea in all ways, and male relationships around sports aren't always ideal. There's bullying, there's exclusiveness, there's stigmatizing of people who aren't competitive in the same ways. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the ways in which women's sports may be different than men's or should aspire to be different than men's athletics?
I think you should aspire to be the best players in your sport. I mean, I think that's what we train for, is to be the best in our sport. I can use basketball as an analogy. I think people always talk about, well, the WNBA isn't as good as the NBA because they don't dunk. And I always ask the question, are you watching the Golden State Warriors right now? What do you like about them? And people tell me, guys will be like, oh man, they pass the ball, they share, they shoot threes, it's unbelievable. You see that behind the back pass. And then I'll say, well, you know that the women do all of that, right? You didn't mention dunking one time. So now it's a thing of beauty when the men are doing it in Golden State. And I'm like, women have been playing fundamental basketball forever. So I just think that women have to just be the best that they can be, grow the league. You're seeing younger girls starting to really, have a vision and aspire to be in the WNBA at a younger age. So they're working on their craft. The game is faster. Women are taller, quicker. That's what we want to see. I don't want there to be a comparison always to the NBA, because at the end of the day, I do think earlier on in our career right now in the WNBA, we have women that understand their place as also role models and wanting to set an example for the future. Whereas if you look back when the NBA started out, which was on tape delay, we have a TV deal right now, but they started 20 years in, and there was a lot of stuff that happened with the NBA before it got to where it's at. People forget that. So I think in its infancy, for me, I just want to see women's sports continue to grow and be the best that it can be.
I also think that while men's, I would never encourage bullying and anything on that extreme. I think that competition is something that women should not shy away from. And I think in your comment, it kind of, to me, implied that women should kind of be happy all the time and always get along. Like, no, I think that one of the best things about sport for me was learning how to fail and learning how to receive negative feedback. I think those are two of the biggest lessons I learned from sport. My college coach was not nice to me a lot of the time. And I learned a lot from that. Like, I am a much stronger person today and a much better rower because of that. And I think not being handled with gloves, like you can't just handle someone with gloves because they're a female. I think it's okay to be brutal and be honest and occasionally be mean. I think sports is an environment where it's in a venue of its own. My college coach wouldn't be mean to me because of who I am as a person. She would be harsh because I was rowing incorrectly. And I think being able to separate those two and have an environment in which you can learn those lessons of failure and criticism in a healthy environment is really important. And I don't think that something being hard or tough or failure is anything that we should try to correct about women's sports. It shouldn't be a happy-go-lucky, we love the team, we're gonna win all the time. Because then you're not gonna learn anything. I think there is something about the harshness of sport, which is why we're here today.
And Title IX is not just about sports, too. I mean, that's another thing. Like, this whole thing was, there was a point to it, right? This was about equality of opportunity, right? And so it's sports, it's activities, it's program. We're talking about the context of sports, but make no mistake about it, we got too few women in STEM, There's a lot of work we need to do on a lot of fronts, and Title IX is there, needs to be enforced, needs to be, supported, but let's recognize, too, that the goal of this was really about equality of opportunity.
So my question is kind of unintentionally related. I think in the last couple of years, you've seen a growth and a rise in women in leadership and coaching in men's sports teams. What role do you think that kind of presence in sport in general and visibility on that level plays in relation to this as well?
I think it's great. I think it reflects that more women are in sport and that they don't see a barrier to participating in men's sports, and they're not intimidated by trying to participate in men's sports. And I think some of that confidence is probably from being an athlete themselves. It's just a guess. I don't know that. But I think as Shira said, there are so many men coaching women's sports. Why not have it the other way around? Women approach the game differently, as Swin said. So if women are better at these behind the back passes and 3-pointers, like why not have a woman coaching a men's team? Like that's something they might be able to contribute to a men's team, change the game so that you're seeing it from another angle, and it can only benefit everyone.
Yeah, and I always say, when you think about a women's team and they hire a male coach, they never get the, why are they hiring a male coach to coach this women's team? This is crazy. They never get that. But as soon as you hear the potential for a woman to coach in the NBA, people are, that's ridiculous. Why would a woman coach in the NBA? Well, right now, you have Becky Hammon, who's on the staff with the Spurs, but Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, recently said, I expect for at some point soon for a woman to be coaching, a head coach in the NBA. I'm just waiting for us to equal out on a collegiate level, high school level. I mean, we might get to if the pros may have it before we start talking about on that level. And I think that's where we need to stop looking at the male versus woman and start thinking about what kind of coach are you, and give more women these opportunities because they can coach. I know some women that know football better than some of the coaches they got on their staff, and I'd be like, to go get her. So I think that's an area that you're hitting right on that we need to look at as well when we talk about kind of Title IX and those issues.
You bring up Becky Hammon and the Spurs, and I think one of the interesting things about that situation is that it's Greg Popovich, who is considered to be the best NBA coach around, and that he's saying, she's qualified, I want her on my staff, I want her front and center, sitting on the bench and instructing my players. And I think that's another important part of the equation. What I loved about the opening weekend of the WNBA is you had a lot of NBA players coming out and saying how much they love the WNBA game. So I think that's another side of it too, where we have to have, we can't ignore the men. They have to be part of the support and driving people toward the women's game. It can't just be women buying the jerseys. It has to be the men, and people like Greg Popovich saying, hey, this is quality right here.
Yeah, but also too, think about this. Whether it's in college, and you know this as well, whether it's in college or pros, when you're athletes, a student athlete, male and female, they talk to each other and you support each other. We don't get that kind of divisiveness. A lot of times it's the people who didn't play sports, or now you're covering sports and you have these opinions. But I go to the Olympics and it's all of the athletes supporting each other. It's our men and women's basketball team literally supporting each other. Like, we get text messages from some of our NBA friends that watching a game, and it's like other people who are covering our sport need the men to validate the fact that we're good. And I'm like, no, we're good. You just haven't caught up yet. And I think that unfortunately, like, that's the reality of it. And we live in that space. And I say it all the time. I get tweets and I get social media from guys that I guarantee you probably couldn't run up and down the court one time, but he's criticizing every single thing about what a woman did and how she plays. And I'm like, you didn't even play intramurals, did you? Like, you didn't really. But that's what happened. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Go on. Sometimes I can vent about that. I don't know.
Hi. I was actually a plaintiff on that Brown case. So thank you for acknowledging that very complex experience for a freshman in college. But
Hi, Jennifer. Jennifer Todd.
I'm also a full-time working mom of 3 in, male-dominated industry. And I think I sit in a lot of panels like this thinking about action. I'm actually optimistic, but I'm also frustrated because I think we have a lot still to do. And, there's opportunity and exposure and continuing the conversation and equal pay. And it's sort of like, where do we start? And I would love to know your, opinion on, like, what do you go back and do right after this panel? Or, because I know I have my own answers to that question, but, where do we start, and how, I don't know, where do we make the most impact right away?
Well, one thing, everything's local, right? So look at your kid's school, look at what's going on there for programming and opportunity. Is it equal or is it not equal? What do we need to do? Look at what's happening at work. I know, as I said, when I started, I did a training in my office on unconscious bias. I think every employer in the state should be doing a training on unconscious bias. Every employer in the state ought to have programs on diversity and inclusion. If you're in a workplace, ask that of your employer, or form a group to go to your employer and demand that kind of action and assessment. You know, we passed an equal pay law here in Massachusetts. Make sure that your employer is actually enforcing that and paying attention to that. And I think the point about where you invest, you know, are you taking kids to see women and girls, say in sports, and this is a sports-specific comment, but are you taking them to games? Are you exposing them to games? If they're interested, are you exposing not just girls, boys, most importantly? Are you exposing your young boys or nephews or grandchildren to women's athletics? When you go into the bar or restaurant later on tonight or this week, and try this on, it's fun. Make them watch, you guys play what night? Thursday?
Yep, Thursday.
You flip that channel over, okay?
ESPN too.
And make them watch ESPN too. And just like find ways to act locally, right? Where can you bring this, and where can you, subtly raise and elevate attention and grow awareness? Those are some things that I think about to start anyways.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The first thing I did whenever I retired, and even during my playing career, but when I retired, I tried to figure out where could I reach my hands out to, like where do the tentacles go that I'm able to touch the people around me. And that's who I want to affect first, because then I know they're going to touch the next 10 people out there. And just try to have change every day, because I think sometimes we think about the big picture and it's overwhelming. But if I think about within our organization, am I changing someone's mindset? Am I helping them see something differently? Am I investing and pouring into our players so that they're becoming better leaders, so that they can go out there and be able to speak and talk about these different topics? Do they know their history enough to be able to speak on it? Like small things like that I think are so important. That's where you can start, because every day you're gonna get up and feel good that, you know what, I'm chucking away at it. Until you get in a room like this and we all have the same goals, and then that's when you really just have a big impact.
I think social media makes it really easy in some senses too. I think when you read stories about the U.S. women's hockey team or the U.S. women's soccer team, post, repost, share it with other people. Make sure that that link in the Times or the Globe is clicked on and it comes up in like the 5 red headlines of the day. Just promote women's sports and women in general.
Absolutely. Demand that your community newspapers put women, girls on the sports pages, okay? You can all pay attention to that too.
Right.
Hi, I just have a suggestion. I am all for all this, we want this, we want that, but where is the action? And I have taken time. I think the most important thing in any kind of business, because sports is a business, is money. At the end of the day, it's an economic question. And every time you have limited resources, there's going to be 2 forces at least fighting for those resources. And in order to get them, the person who has them in their hands has to release them, either because they're going to get something out of what they're giving it to, or because the other party has found out how they're going to get those resources from them. Sports runs on endorsement, funding, and sponsorship deals. And a lot of times, that has already gone to the male sports. I think the women's sports should go back to a drawing board. How do we invite and sustain funding in women's sports at a micro level? We want to go for big funding. We want to, for example, I'll give an example. Boston Breakers just announced today they got Dunkin' Donuts on board for them, which is a big achievement. But that doesn't happen every day. But I looked at their packages. Anybody with $5,000 cannot invest as a partner in the Boston Breakers, all right? And a lot of people are tired of being consumers. They want to have a vested interest in our team. They want to be stockholders or stakeholders in a team. If we would give opportunities to mothers and smaller funders to come in as stockholders, just like startups operate, and allow this to grow. Eventually, if somebody has put their dime in a team, rain or shine, they're showing up. They're going to make sure there is a buzz in the newspaper. They're going to make sure every politician in that area is paying attention to what's happening. They're going to hold them accountable. If you do not pay attention to my team, I'm not giving you my vote. So ultimately, it comes down to, are you allowing this person to own a portion of women's sports? And that's what I think we should take from this level. Thank you.
I think that's an interesting concept, and I'll just wrap up this panel with this thought. When we were organizing this, I was emailing some people I know in the community, some longtime head coaches of women's sports, and one of them was a woman who has coached forever in Massachusetts high school athletics, Mim Jarema. I don't know if she's here tonight. She said she was going to come. Anyway, she said to me, well, a couple of things. First of all, I think I played basketball in this gym way back when, once upon a time. And she said, also, I'm really happy that you're organizing an event like this because it's about vigilance. And it's about vigilance not just when it's the 45th anniversary of Title IX coming up, or when we're gearing up for an Olympic year and women sort of seem to take center stage in Olympic years, or when there's a Women's World Cup going on. And I think that's an important takeaway, which is it's about vigilance. It's about having conversations like this all the time, year-round, every year, and it doesn't have to be a special anniversary year. It should just be. And with that, I would like to again thank Radcliffe and WBUR and two special people, Amy McDonald and Becky Wasserman, who have been by my side as we took this from conception to reality. So thank you, and thank you all for coming. And thank you to the panelists, Maura, Gevvie, and Swin. Thank you very much.